Alright guys, for today's lessons it'll be very short, straight to the point, but you're gonna have to watch the whole video because you're gonna have some questions about me, about my travel over the years, so that will be part of your exit ticket to make sure you're watching my videos. So make sure you watch the entire video. Alright, so once again, keywords, you got reservations, you have assimilate, segregation, Reconstruction Act of 1867, and the Dawes Act. So we're going to be going over these keywords. Make sure you remember it so you guys can be successful in your exit ticket, and also the fun facts about myself. There we go, moving on. So we talked about this yesterday, the transcontinental railroads. As you can see, the transcontinental railroads, there's many different companies. One that starts from New York all the way to San Francisco. Others that start by Michigan, Chicago, all the way up to Oregon and Washington, New Orleans, through Los Angeles and through San Francisco. So once again, faster transportation, and the bad thing about it is that many buffaloes would be killed during this time frame. Segregation, already said, segregation means to be separated. They want you to separate different cultures, whites and blacks, in separate rooms, separate classrooms, separate theaters, separate water fountains. So that's what segregation means. This is part of the Jim Crow laws we talked about yesterday as well, or 2 days ago. Reservation. Now this is something that's new. Some of y'all know what this is, some of y'all don't. Reservation is basically land that's put aside for Native Americans. So once again, America feels really bad for what they've done over the hundreds of years to the Native Americans. So what America is going to do, they're going to give land to, I guess, Native American tribes and put it aside for them, and they can, govern their people and live in peace amongst themselves, away from everyone else. But as you can see here, the land they're giving them is not the best land. It's kind of dry land, desert, so it's not really the best land for the Native Americans, which we'll talk more about in a bit. And I put this right here too because Kickapoo, many of y'all hear the advertisement of Kickapoo Casino. The reason why there's casinos in Texas is because those are Native American land. Native American land are people that own that land, the tribes. They can have their own type of casino. Like I said, they don't have to follow like the Texas laws. They can follow their own laws because they're like a separate nation in that region. So once again, that's why there's casinos in that area of Texas. Moving on. And the last one, assimilate. This is a good one. So assimilate means to be the same. So this photo I put here, assimilate means that they want Native Americans to assimilate to American culture, which basically means they want them to be more white American. They want them to dress like Americans. They want them to cut their hair short like Americans. They want them to be elegant because they feel like this way of living is a savage way of living. They shouldn't be living like this. They need to become more Americanized and more white American. So assimilate means to keep or be the same as someone else. So that's what assimilate means. All right, moving on. So Reconstruction Act of 1867, law that made Union soldiers supervised and forced Southerners to implement the 14th Amendment. So basically the Reconstruction Act is just a law that Congress passes, the Radical Republicans pass, to make sure soldiers are keeping an eye out for African Americans and making sure that they're being protected, because many white Americans in the South do not want to give 13th, 14th, or 15th Amendment to these African Americans. So soldiers are sent to help and supervise and protect the African Americans. And it says here that the Union soldiers, which are the Northern soldiers, have supreme authority, which means they have the absolute power in the South, and everybody must follow the Union's laws. And last but not least, the Reconstruction, it's going to divide the South into 5 military districts. And basically, like you see in this photo right here, you have a Union soldier in the middle between the African Americans and the white Southerners. These are going to be former Confederate soldiers. As you can see, they're being very violent towards African Americans because they do not want them to be to practice their 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. They don't believe that African Americans should be treated equally to whites, which is why Radical Republicans knew this. So that's why they send Union soldiers to protect them. And as you guys know, 10 years after this law was passed in 1877, the Union soldiers will leave the South And when they leave the South, that's when everything goes downhill. The South, or these people right here, the Southerners, they're going to make Jim Crow laws, black codes, segregation laws towards African Americans. They're going to make African Americans pay a poll tax to vote, even knowing that they don't have any money. They're also going to make them take a literacy test. In order to vote, you have to pass a test where you can read. Many of them don't know how to read or write because they've never been educated. So like I said, this is kind of before 1877, so this is what's happening. But as you know, once the soldiers leave the South, there is no one really to protect these African Americans. So once again, when you think about Reconstruction Act, think about it as a law that helps African Americans and basically, which are these Union soldiers. Our next one, the Dawes Act of 1887. I like this. The way I teach it to my kids every year, whenever you see the Dawes Act, you see the A and a W in the middle of this word. And the reason why I want you to emphasize in the A and the W, what does that sound like? When you sound it out, it means aw, right? Like aw, pobrecito, right? So when you think of the Dawes Act, always circle that, always remember it. All poor Indian, all right? So, all poor Indian. I know it sounds hilarious or sounds funny that I'm doing that, but it's going to help you a lot to remember this information. So, once again, why do I keep saying that all poor Indian? Well, this is a law that's going to make Native Americans' life a living hell, basically. They're not going to be, it's not a good law for them. Congress is saying it's a good law for the Native Americans, but in reality, it's not really good for Native Americans. So, I'm going to tell you more in detail. So the purpose was to force Indians to assimilate, be like whites. So I want to give you a perspective. Let's pretend America passes this law today, and it's targeting Mexican Americans. And they're saying that Mexican Americans need to be more American, white American. You got to eat cheeseburgers every day. You got to eat French fries every day because that's the American way of life. That's American food. You got to eat hot dogs every day. Many of us that are Hispanics, we have our own cultures. You know, our families make different types of foods, because that is our culture. Maybe they say you can no longer wear cowboy boots because you need to be assimilated to whites. You can only dress like white Americans. So, like I said, that is not really a good law because it takes away your culture. It takes away your identity of who you are. And that's what this Dawes Act is passed. It's to make Native Americans become white Americans. And by doing that, you want them to assimilate, become like them. So, that's the best way I can compare it to what we go through. It's like saying we can no longer eat tamales for Christmas. You know, you got to eat, turkey or ham. You can no longer eat menudo. You need to eat chicken noodle soup. Things like that. It's just what the heck? Like, that's not our culture. You can no longer eat corn tortillas. Now you got to eat white bread. Like, I don't know. I'm just giving you examples. But like I said, this for Native Americans, it really does not. It's not a good thing for them because it's forcing them to change their whole culture. Moving on. So I put this little photo here. As you can see, you have a Native American on the left side. And then after they passed this law, he had to cut his hair. He had to dress like a white American. And his whole identity is gone. Like, now he's following the law. But who knows if that's what he really wanted, because they're forcing him to do that. So once again, remember, we live in America where we're free to be who we want to be. Even the 10th Amendment gives us that right. Like, we have the right to be who we want to be in life. If we want to dress the way we want to dress, we have that right. But when they passed this law in 1887, basically it takes away these Native Americans' rights. All right, moving on. Took tribal land away, gave it to individual Native Americans. So it's taking away people's land, which is not a good thing either, because people are losing their land and their way of life. And finally, tribes lost about 2/3 of their land due to this Dawes Act. And I'm going to go more in details of what they did to these lands and how they distribute the land to these Native Americans. So when you think about the Dawes Act, say all poor Indian, because Native Americans are going to be forced to become like white Americans. And they just changed their way of life. And put yourself in that perspective like that. Would you guys be okay if they force you to be like something you're not? I think a lot of y'all would not agree with that. All right, moving on. So as you can see, these are reservations today in America. You can barely see it. The photo's not the best, but you can see that most of the reservations are in the West. And as you know about the Western territories, it's very dry. There you can't farm. They left these Native Americans by themselves. And a lot of these Native Americans have never even farmed in their life because all they did was hunt and gather because they killed buffalo. But remember, they want them to be white Americans. You can no longer do that. So they have to find a way to, do something different besides hunting and gathering, which is hard for them because they're not used to that. Moving on. This is a little primary source about the Dawes Act. You guys can read over it, look over it, but basically it's just saying how Native Americans' way of life is killed. I mean, they don't even know who they are anymore because they're being forced to do something they don't want to do. This has been tested in the previous stars a couple of years ago. I think out of the 5 years I've been teaching this course, it's come out like twice, so it can appear on a star. But anyways, that's why it's important to learn this. All right, moving on. Now going into my travel history. So I'm going to give you some trivia questions, and hopefully you guys retain it so you guys can get a good grade on your exit ticket. So this photo I took when I went to Italy. It's the Pisa Tower. As you guys can see here, it's leaning towards the side. So fun facts about it. This was actually started in 1100. So once again, and then it continued to stop being constructed because a war broke out. Then it tried to be rebuilt in 1200. And then another war broke out in Italy, and then finally in 1300 they completed the construction of the Pisa Tower. Now the reason why it's slightly like tilted sideways, or obviously not straight, is because when they first started making it, they didn't make a good foundation for this. And and when you don't do a great foundation, it's like a house, right? The most important thing about building a house is the foundation or the platform before you start putting all the materials on top of the foundation. If the foundation is not very strong, or you make a foundation on like marshy soil, then it shifts a lot. And that's what happened with this building. When they made it, they didn't anticipate that the soil was not the best soil to build a big tower like that, which is why over the years it kept going sideways. Now I didn't go inside that tower because to be fair, I was kind of scared. Like, you never know when the day's gonna be when it just falls apart. But you can see the people in the line there, they're all lining up to go inside. And I didn't really have enough time to go in and make the line because I was on a tour trip. So we have to only take photos and leave right away. I'm going to show you some photos of what it looks like on the other photo. As you can see the dome right there. I did go into that one. There was no line to go in there. And you guys can see what the dome looks like inside. By the way, I'm very happy. As you can see, this photos were taken by a Galaxy phone, not an Apple phone. So pretty good quality. Just letting you guys know. Just throwing it out there for you guys to know that. Moving on. So once again, we have the dome inside. It's basically angels around. As you know, when people they painted this in 1300. So once again, this building is about 700 years old. So going back to the Pisa Tower, this is about 700 years old. All right. So once again, 1400, 1500, 1600, 1700, 1800, 1900, 20. Right. So yeah, it's about 700 years old. Moving on. This other building over here, I'm going to show you what's inside the church, and you guys can see what's inside the church. So basically, that's what the church looks like inside. And then they have a little photo of Jesus or of God, and that's kind of what it looks like. All right, moving on. Those are some fun facts about that one, and I got one more. So I went to Venice, Italy, as you can see. If you guys ever seen the movie Spider-Man with he's fighting Mysterio, that's kind of where it takes place when they go on the field trip to Europe. I think that's where they start fighting. Very beautiful city. These buildings were built on top of a lagoon and tree trunks. So the buildings are not floating, but they don't have the best support underneath them. All right, moving on. I want to show you something else. When we went there to go on a gondola, which is one of those boats, it's 120 euros for 20 minutes, which is about $150 American dollars, but it's 120 euros. We didn't do it because it's too expensive. And last but not least, before I run out of time, because I have a minute, this clock was made by a man, and he made it, and he was asked by merchants to make the best clock in the world. When he made this clock, it was such a great clock, and the people that paid this man to make this clock, they didn't want him to make it for anybody else. So once he completed this clock, which still functions today, as you can see, it says 9:30 there, it still functions. They actually took his eyes out. So he could no longer make it for anyone else or see how he can make another one like this, because the merchants of this city of Venice, they wanted to be the only clock in the world that was iconic like this. So after the man made this amazing clock in this city, they took his eyes out, and obviously you could never make it again. So that was his reward for making a really cool clock that still functions today. All right, later, guys.